Hello, everyone.
Hello, hello.
Hello. Hello, everyone. We are thrilled to have you with us today. We're going to get started here in just a moment. I'm here in San Antonio where it's rainy, and I hope other people are staying warm and dry in the different weather we have all throughout our country today. I'm Megan Libby. I am an associate professor at UT Health in San Antonio, and joined today by my colleague, Dr. Andrew Davis, who is an associate professor at University of Portland. Together, we are co-investigators for the End-of-Life Nursing Education Consortium, and we specifically focus on supporting schools of nursing throughout the country with advancing their palliative care education. And we're thrilled to have you join us today on the last of our series of undergrad modules. So we're thrilled to have you. I'm going to let Andra introduce our guest speaker briefly, and then we'll move into our content for today. You are muted, friend.
There we go. Lots of things open. Hard to find where I'm at on my screen. Hello, everyone, and it's great to see some beloved faces and names here. I would like to introduce Luca Cobb, who I think might still be traveling to get.
I'm here. I'm just trying to get my computer so you guys can see my face, but I'm still on my phone here.
All right. Well, let me introduce Luca, one of my colleagues that is a palliative care nurse practitioner on Whidbey Island up here in Washington State, connected me with Luca, who, fun fact, is a graduate of University of Portland in 2012, which is where I am. I wasn't here then. And Luca has experience is one of our practice partners. So we really are trying and love the chance to bring in folks that are actually in practice right now that can share their sort of real life experiences with us as we try to integrate palliative care and end of life care, particularly final hours content in our curriculum. In our different programs. So while I'm doing that really quick, would y'all just put in the chat if you've been with us before or not? Because that gives us a little bit of a head start in how we might approach our process today. So Luca worked in telemetry on a med-surg unit and for a couple of years, and then the emergency room, and then transitioned to Luca, transitioned to hospice as a case manager, and then ended up out on Whidbey Island, which is a island off of Seattle, sort of just orientation if you're familiar with the area. And it is has one critical access hospital out there. And Luca is the after hours triage nurse. And so Luca has wonderful experience and will share with us, and feel free to ask questions later on as we kind of talk about this today, about her experiences providing rural care, as well as being with people in their final hours. So with that, I think I'll pass it back to Megan. Welcome, Luca. We're so happy to have you here.
Yes, so we do want to acknowledge our funding for our webinars. This webinar is being provided by ELNEC with generous financial support from the Cambia Health Foundation. So we want to make sure we acknowledge that. And I'm thrilled to see in the chat, we have a lot of first-time attendees, which is reaffirming to me that the next bit of information is not as redundant as I was worried it was going to be. Now, if you've been on our webinars before, you've heard this part, but what we like to do is begin our webinars with just sort of situating this into the bigger picture of nursing education, and share some important documents that we would encourage you to consider that might be helpful as you look to maybe integrating palliative care education in your curricula in different ways. So next slide. So when Dr. Davis and we've been doing palliative care education work together, we just calculated it the other day for 8 years. It's been quite some time we've been working as a partnership team here. One of the documents we frequently cite in our work is the ANA and the HPNA call for action, and it speaks to the need for nurses to lead and transform palliative care. And as you'll see on the next slide, one of their top recommendations is that practices or educational institutions adopt the end-of-life curricula, these ELNEC curricula, sort of as a standard for palliative care education. We recognize that there's a lot of deficiencies in textbooks in terms of having any of this content, but also staying up to date, whereas our ELNEC modules are updated frequently. So that's one of the rationale we like to cite, is that some leading organizations have really called attention to this. Now, undergraduate is noted in this, and then we did subsequently, ELNEC created a graduate curricula, which would still fall under this sort of rationale. It just didn't exist at the time of this publication. Next. There are quite a few ELNEC curricula. So ELNEC, the ELNEC project started in 2000, and there's been many different curricula throughout the years. Dr. Davis and I, again, we focus on schools of nursing. And so the ones we spend the majority of our time with are the undergraduate or new graduate curricula for some of your pre-licensure or your entry to practice nurses, and then the graduate curricula for your advanced level students. Next slide. I'm sure many of y'all are well aware of the essentials at this point, but just as a reminder, the essentials has these 2 levels, and we like to remind individuals that ELNEC undergraduate, new graduate, which is the module series we're focusing on today, was specifically designed to really target that level 1 learner that we've leveled, and the content's really meant for that level of learner. Next slide. And we love the spheres of care because this is where it's called attention to the need for hospice, palliative supportive care. And so this is where maybe how you found us is seeking to figure out how do you address that sphere of care. And we'll explore ways that we can do that, that you might consider doing that in your program. We also, in this world of competency-based education that we are living in, we want to call individuals' attentions to some competence statements that have been created by the ELNEC team and endorsed by AECN. So these are the CARES competencies would be for your undergraduate or your level 1 learner. There are 17 competence statements. These are written more as like a global competence statement. Similar to like CUSIN competencies and those sorts of things. But if you're looking for in your program competence statements that would really signal to that sphere of hospice palliative care, this would be the documents that we would encourage you to look at. They were originally created in 2016, and then subsequently we actually revised those 17 statements to 15 statements with the release of the new essentials. All right, so as we think about final hours, which is the module today, one of the things that as Dr. Davis and our team and we were looking at these care statements, we actually created a new care statement a few years ago that specifically spoke to the role of the nurse in those final hours. So providing culturally sensitive care that is responsive to rapidly changing physical, psychological, social, and spiritual needs during the dying process and after death. So that one, more than any of our other 15 statements, is specifically speaking to final hours, but we also recognize that nurses are going to use these other competencies. We're going to engage in the nursing process, whether our patients are in their final hours or not. So that's where these other competence statements might come into play as well. And then also we like to share, Dr. Davis and I, with funding from the National League for Nursing back in several years ago, we created a competence assessment tool, which parallels with CARES in a way, but these are actually more observable behaviors that we would expect kind of an entry-level nurse to be demonstrating when providing palliative care. And in this, we have many different domains. So we have 9 different domains, but we have 2 specific observable behaviors that we have identified as competence within this care nearing the end of life or in final hours. This tool is published. We also have it available on our ELNEC faculty corner, which we'll share. But if you're looking for competence statements, we have resources already for you, whether it's the care statements or with our competence assessment tool. And those are all ready to be shared. Next. So as I mentioned, we've been doing a series. We called it the 2023 series, but we took the summer off. So we're rounding out in 2024. We have covered all 6 of the ELNEC modules. Well, today's the 6th. We've recorded all the webinars. So if you are curious about any of the other ELNEC webinars and how you might integrate those into your curricula, those are available on the ELNEC faculty corner. We have the slides and the recordings posted for your review. And you can share it with colleagues as well.
Yeah, I wonder if we are making an assumption that folks know what we mean.
Yeah, do we want to hop to the corner real quick? Or are you talking about the modules?
The modules.
Yeah, well.
Do y'all know what we're talking about when we're speaking about, I mean, there's, end of life palliative education, and then there's the ELNEC curriculum. Everyone familiar? Okay, I'm seeing some thumbs up and nodding heads. If not, we'll get there.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, so any questions, let us know. You can drop them in the chat. We are monitoring the chat. So with this, we do like to just sort of share where we're at with things. To date, or as of our last report, we're at almost 1,200 schools that are using the ELNEC undergraduate curricula, and almost at 400 schools using graduate. So as we're seeing palliative care education expand and institutions recognizing the need for it, we are thrilled to see this growth. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Davis. One of the things we like to do is share some, not the whole module, because it does take about an hour and a half for students to work through this online module, but we like to show a little bit of the features or the look of this. So Dr. Davis is going to take us to it. Just know, if you want access, faculty get free access to the undergraduate or graduate curricula. So you can email elnec@coh.org. We'll have Andrea drop that email in the chat. And you can email and just say, I'd like to request access to whichever curricula, and we'll send it to you, because we recognize faculty want to see what is this before deciding if it might work well for their students. All right, Dr. Davis, over to you.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I don't know about you, but you may know that it is integrated in different courses in your program, but not necessarily have looked at particular modules recently. So we want to reiterate that you have, forever access. You can continue to get, I think the access it's free, but you get it for like a year, and then you can just have it extended if you want to continue using it. But it's helpful, and it was helpful for me to come back and revisit this one as I was preparing for today. And I'm pretty sure you can all see the screen, and I hope it's big enough. Just a thumbs up if anybody would like me to make that a little bit bigger. I'm happy to do that. It's okay. Trish says okay. Okay. All right. So this is the newest edition. Some of you may notice, if you're used to the one from the last revision, it has a different look, and this is from 2023. And as mentioned, this is the 6th and final module around final hours of life. And I'd call your eyes over to the left. What do we call that? Dashboard. And you can see the little check marks means I've gone through the whole thing, because I needed to do that in order to kind of do a quick drive-by today with you all. But I want you to see that sort of how it's laid out, and we will look at some of the different features of the modules. And the reason for this is what your students would do if you use this.
Hey, Ambra,
Yeah,
This is Isabel. Sorry, can you make it quite a bit bigger?
you got it.
Yes. Thank you.
Is that better?
It is better. Thank you so much.
Okay. Of course. Thanks for asking, Isabel. So there are the embedded after different, so over here is a little media thing. So it's a video. And after many of these, we have these points of reflection. So there are some questions that the viewer, which are students, are invited to consider. And that is one place. We're going to unpack it a little bit about how you might augment this in the classroom in ways to, or in simulation, to dive in a little bit deeper and have some more group process around some of the elements. I mean, it's all important, but when we think about final hours in particular, it can be, maybe triggering for folks. So the reflections are a chance, to bring in those questions back into the classroom. So if you use this as an assignment before class to have them go through this module, you can sort of guide them to be prepared to come in and share certain parts of it. And you'll see ways that you might do this throughout. Let's see. All right, so let's just
Also, to
Yeah.
that point, if you teach in online programs, those are really great opportunities for discussion boards as well, to engage students through reflection,
thank
using
you.
those questions as maybe some prompts in discussion, if you're in more of those online academic spaces.
Okay, so let's just get started here. There's always sort of the basic learning objectives, and then we're going to go look at, I think this is an example of a testimonial. And there are a few in this particular module where experts in the area have provided a little bit of a conversation around a particular issue. This in particularly is around witnessing a good death. The one thing I didn't do before we set up was make sure that my audio settings were good for hearing this, but let's just give it a try and see how this sounds. Okay, I'm just going to play a little bit of it so you can get a taste. And before I do that, you'll notice one of the features that we have now is that to just make sure students actually watch it, is you cannot start it and stop it and zip the little thing all the way to the end and move on to the next section. They actually have to watch it. You can increase the speed. It is closed caption, but they do have to watch the whole thing. So let's see how this sounds.
Like head for a 54-year-old woman with.
Nope, I'm going to go back here.
Well, I can describe a good death. I think the most important thing to remember is that each individual has their own idea of what a good death is. But I think in general, when we think about a good death, we like to think that it's one that is free from physical suffering, that the patient and the family come to a place of acceptance and peace, and that there may be even some personal growth for the family and the individual who is dying.
She goes on in this clip to describe an example of such a situation where there was some discordance among the family members and what happened to help them at the end of this person's life, this family member. So this is a great example of something like, what the heck is a good death? And how do we kind of think about that as providers? And then here's an example of a reflection that follows that video. Take a minute to think about a death that you've experienced. And then there are some prompts here. And you could look at this ahead of time, and this could be an invitation to sort of unpack in the classroom if you wanted to do that. Let's see, let's go to being with and bearing witness. This is another really the notion of holding space and being present. This is another really wonderful thing that you can turn into a classroom activity even, or role play with each other around actually practicing the discomfort, if you will, that may exist when you're just trying to hold presence and not do something. And then this is another example of one of the features of the platform is there are these little cards, and they turn it around, and then there's a little bit of a guide in what you might say. using language like I wish, I worry, I wonder, and such. Feel free to jump in if you like. Again, effective communication. Let's go down and look at this. Here's another, this is a vignette, and I'm not going to show the whole thing, but this is a situation between a family member and a nurse. And this is a real nurse from MUSC.
Hi there, how are you?
I'm okay.
Well, my name is Michael.
Hey, Michael. I'm
And-
Sue.
Okay, nice to meet you,
Nice
Sue.
to meet you.
I'm the nurse that is taking care of Mr. Smith. Are you family? Are you friends?
Yes, he's my dad.
So this goes on for 5 minutes, this video, and you can look at talking about body language. You can look at you can, if you, once you watch this first, go through and, you know, critique it in many ways. Like, I wasn't comfortable with how the nurse asked these questions. What are some other ways that we might do that? So there's so many parts of this that are just rich with opportunities for you to take into the classroom. Rather than just turn in your certificate and you get credit, right?
I will say sometimes showing these again in class, that it always surprises me the lens that some students view these through, and these new perspectives that they bring forward to class as a way to consider, you know, how might if you were the nurse, how might you have engaged in that similarly or differently, or so it is kind of nice to refresh their memory, show it, but then open dialogue. And we never say the videos are perfect, right? Because things aren't always perfect. So they're, and even when we think they're really good, students find opportunities for how they might do it different.
Here's one more expert testimony from very short clip. This one's only 2 minutes. I think we'll just share a little bit of this from Dr. Judith Pace, for those of you that know her.
When we're not honest with people about the fact that death is approaching, we rob them of a very important opportunity to conduct the final business of life.
So again, this is a great chance to talk about honest communication and something that is difficult, right, for students. Anybody have any comments or questions?
There's a great question from Anna about like with the effective communication, does it address cultural diversity? That vignette speaks to veteran status, so that the patient in that specific vignette is a veteran, and so there is conversation about some of the practices that would be important to that patient and the daughter with being a veteran. We do have, if it's not in videos, we did try to because there's case studies we've written in some of these, or little scenarios or in questions we've tried to think about reflecting diversity in that way. And then Dr. Davis and I have separate funding that we're both creating additional videos right now. They're not ready. Mine are almost ready to roll out in a couple months, and Dr. Davis is in the beginning of this, but we're working to add even more videos into our repository that can be used that reflect different elements of spiritual and cultural and all sorts of different types of identities and diversity consideration.
And we're building out faculty guides, compendiums for each one of these that include different kinds of case studies. And certainly you all have rich backgrounds and opportunities to bring in and tailor those as you see useful in your setting. Thank you for that question. This is an example. Oh, well, it gave me right to the I wanted to show you. Okay, here we go. So, oh, it's not going to let me because I already took it. So there are questions over here. You can see review. So apparently if I get it right.
Take again.
Oh, take again. Thank you. There we go. So now you can see.
A second.
Here's a question, and the students have I'm just going to pick an answer. Maybe it's right. Oh, I got it right. If I get it wrong, it tells me, and it doesn't allow them to move forward until they get it right. So also built-in little chances to do some sort of metacognition and self-evaluation. Each of these different sections has a summary section. The next one is around ethical and legal considerations that are built in here in this module. For those of you that integrate those particular concepts. They kind of live here, although you could put them in any of these modules really. And high level, so ethical and legal considerations at the end of life. Currently, we still have the impact of COVID on end of life care, still really very much in folks' minds. And so much of what we have learned about end of life care in different settings through the pandemic. Life-sustaining measures, and I'll just hop to that. For example, like let's talk about things like withdrawing life-sustaining measures, withholding them and limiting them. This is a really important area to unpack with students. And again, here's the turn the card around. They have to go turn the card around and before they can move to the next section. And this one is talking about resuscitation. And then we have medically administered nutrition and hydration as another sort of topical area at the end of life, thirst, appetite at end of life, analgesic control, and issues around hastening death. You all know this is very much a topical area of concern and interest with students and nurses as well. So this is built in, again, opportunities for you to build on this in the classroom. And then we have
real quick, I do want to just, in this ethics section, there's quite a bit more that's been added compared to the prior version of this curricula. So again, if you haven't seen this, I encourage you to check it out. We did look to our other ELNEC curricula as well, like geriatrics and pediatrics and critical care, because we recognize our students go into these different practice settings. And so where possible, if there were some real kind of big areas that, for example, critical care, we've got a section we added on ECPR and some of these technologies that we might use really as a way, because we know a lot of students like to think about critical care, emergency room, these high acuity settings. And so we did integrate a bit more peds, or again, we borrowed from some of our other curricula and then leveled it for this more entry-level learner to get them thinking about some of these challenges, some of these concerns with fetal care, or some of their moral distress they might experience with that before they're in those practice settings. So there is quite a bit more in this particular section that we've added and expanded upon from prior editions.
It wasn't there before.
One,
Thank you for that.
just, I don't know if this is the right time to jump in and say this,
Go
but
for it,
just
Luca.
as someone who works with, I do a lot of education to patients, families, caregivers, nurses in nursing homes, assisted living, stuff like that. I think one thing that often we become kind of numb to what discomfort looks like. Before people transition towards end of life, there's, well, we can't give more narcotics because it might sedate their respiratory drive or whatever. And so I think people get used to the patient moaning, crying when they turn them. And I just really encourage people to, in the room when they're with that patient, think, is this how I would want to look? Does this look like comfort to me? And if it doesn't, use the medications or advocate. And I think being in that space and making yourself sit there and be with the patient really helps you, am I uncomfortable? Why am I uncomfortable? Is it because this isn't comfort? And is there something I can do to help advocate for that?
Yeah, really excellent point. And it reminds me of some of the recent ethics situations that I've been part of with on an ethics committee here in my area that are really grounded in the nurses' moral distress around exactly that. Attempting to advocate and what happens when the family has a little different understanding about what the implications are, misconceptions around medicating and such. So also really very relevant. Thanks for adding that in. Then frequent symptoms associated with imminent death. Let's just go to this 2 roads to death, sort of the different ways that it might look. And the point of our time together today is not to go through this in detail, but to just give you a sense of what the interface is for students. Signs and symptoms, they need to open up each one of these. I think because I already have, I don't need to, but it's very short, really easy. Just, high level, what are the kind of things, this is also really important, a great opportunity to say, now that you have gone through this, come into the classroom, let's do a patient or family educational role play around this, and give them a scenario, kind of building on what you were saying, Luca. Let's see, psychological concerns, and then there's spiritual concerns, the importance of spiritual care. This is another testimonial. I won't share it right now, but talking specifically about spiritual and cultural considerations here. And the dying child, there's a little bit about children at the end of life, which can then, depending on your faculty expertise, be, you know, used in different areas, clinical areas, for example. This would be really great in a variety of settings. And then key points to take away related to the dying child. And then there's the dying older adult and some information about that. And then follow care, care following a death, excuse me. Also a really important part, and I know we have Kaylee's on the call today, and in our simulation, they do postmortem care as sort of an important part of the skill set, if you will, at the end of life. But here's also another opportunity to build out in different ways. Care for and respecting the body. So there's all of these words that then we can translate in some way in active learning in the classroom. Finally, I think I'll just bring you to care of self. This is a really lovely sort of background from Jonathan Bartles, who was the initiator of the pause, for those of you that are familiar with the pause, which, yeah, so some of you are. I think I'll just play it really quick and then we're going to wind up and move on. Might put it, look, you can put it on.
My name is Jonathan Bartels.
Go a little bit
I've been a
faster.
nurse for over 17 years, been in healthcare for 28. For 11, or mostly half of my career, I was a trauma nurse at a level 1 trauma center. I've since moved on. I'm now a palliative care liaison. But during my time in trauma, I created a concept called the pause. So the pause is a practice of just honoring someone who's passed and using silence to do it. It's nothing hard. It's not brain science. So before I did the pause, before I started to really implement it, you know, man, I would be banging stable life, you know, doing the compressions, doing what I had to do. And then when we call it, we'd have to move on. And I would have to just walk away.
So this is in this module in the context of self-care. And I would think of, we could think about it as team care, you know, care for yourself and care for the team when you're in the midst of this work, during a lot of other work. So that's pretty much it. And then it wraps up, and every one of the modules ends with a set of questions that the students take, multiple choice questions. And if they reach a certain percentage, then they get the certificate. The other beautiful thing, for those of you that are not familiar, I'm going to stop sharing now, is that once they complete all the modules, they can get a certificate of completion and add that to their resumes. So let's hop over to some questions and, you know, just a Q&A section here for a few minutes.
So when it comes to the, just know, so on the platform itself, students can see two things. One is a transcript that shows sort of the score they got on that end of module knowledge assessment. And then there's a completion certificate. We like to encourage faculty to have students submit the completion certificate, because the way that the knowledge assessment is built, once they reach that 80%, or they can't go back in and complete it again. So students will email and say, wait, but I want to get 100, and they can't get back in. And we know how students can get a little overwhelmed by that. So instead, it's if they submit their certificate, they only got that by achieving that 80% or higher. So instead of giving students, you know, you earn what you get on the quiz, more of a completion. But as you can see too, with what's in there, there's a lot of really important topics, but also things that are emotionally laden and mentally challenging for students or psychologically challenging. So to just have them do the module and say, good, you can do end of life care now, doesn't quite work. So instead, it's really about how do we then invite them back into our classroom spaces, where however those look, whether it's clinical conference, or big classes or small classes or online spaces, whatever, to really sort of work through some of these elements and help them really kind of lean into maybe where they are feeling distress, or encouraging them to think about where have you maybe struggled with this in prior experiences, and how could we do this differently? So not just, we just want to, again, you'll hear it a lot, but just helping them to reflect and apply it to their future care as well.
So I'm just looking at the chat, and there were a lot of good comments in there. So hopefully folks have had a chance to look through that. And we'd like to kind of have an opportunity to hear from Luca. And Luca, I'd be really curious to see how you sort of receive that module. Like, what do you think about that? And in terms of new grads and preparing nursing students?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great. It's interesting kind of bringing myself back to being that new nurse or the nurse in nursing school, and how, all the experience I've gained since, and it is hard to distill this stuff into, if this happens, then this. And I would almost say that end of life is one of the hardest kind of scenarios to do that in. It's easy to look at labs and know numbers or urine output, blood pressure, stuff like that. But really, especially in these final hours, I find people can have totally abnormal vital signs for weeks. And I mean like SATs in the 70s, or they can have totally normal vital signs and die 10 minutes later. And so it is hard. And I think also probably a lot of nursing students were similar to me in that, we like the science, we like to know precise what to expect. And that really is just not the case in end of life, because everyone's so different. One of the things, kind of, I have a couple phrases that I find myself using a lot with families, kind of in helping them through this stage. And one thing I like to say is, people die the way they lived. One of our docs said that, and I think that's so accurate, and it brings a lot of comfort to families as well. So, maybe grandpa was a curmudgeon and, really stubborn his whole life, and here he is just restless and agitated, needing a lot of meds. Well, maybe that's just him. And, we can treat those symptoms, but that doesn't mean it's a bad death for him, as long as we get him comfortable. Or, someone who fights really hard until the end and then dies very quickly. Maybe that's just them and their personality. So I really like to kind of encourage or share that with family to help them kind of process what's going on. And I think the way the session talks about bearing witness and presence, I think that's really one of the most important things we can do as nurses, and also one of the most uncomfortable things. I know in nursing school, they really stressed a lot that idea of presence. And I think this is one of the spaces where that is most important. And I often find when I am with patients, kind of in these final hours, final moments phase, what my role is more than anything is oftentimes just kind of standing in the corner and narrating to family kind of what's going on. I see this happening. This is telling me this. And then also, helping them see the distress. So, a lot of families are very opposed to using morphine or narcotics because that fear that they're going to kill their loved one. And as nurses, I mean, especially a new nurse, you're kind of feeling like, I'm going to give this dose of morphine and that's going to be what killed them. I have given so much morphine in my career, and I am constantly amazed how hard it truly is to overdose someone on morphine in this phase. And really just that recognition of, we're seeing that he's grimacing, or look how hard he's working to breathe. That tells me that he's not comfortable, and this medication can help with that. And so turning it into, pointing out, this is what I'm seeing, this is how we can treat it. And then the other thing, and I don't know, I mean, I didn't go through the whole module, but does it talk much about terminal agitation? Okay, because that's another one that I find, and I wonder sometimes, I get patients that were discharged from the hospital and I read through kind of their hospital stuff and, they were pulling at lines, they needed to have soft restraints, whatever. And I wonder how much of that is that terminal agitation. And I don't think that that's generally recognized and treated as terminal agitation, especially in the hospital setting. And that is something that can be very challenging to treat. And I think also that, grandma has dementia. She's always crying out. We're just kind of used to this. Well, it doesn't have to be that way. Does this look like comfort to you? How do we treat it? And that's another one that often needs a lot of medication escalation. And so being comfortable reaching out to your provider and saying, this is what I'm seeing. What can we do? And the expectation that, especially, when we're looking at these final hours, it's not like we have days to titrate meds and hope that they work. So at least in my practice, I expect if I don't see results within 30 minutes, that I'm then reaching out and asking for more or giving another dose or kind of reevaluating things. Because 30 minutes when you're sitting with someone who's uncomfortable, that even seems like a long time. And you do have to give the meds a little bit of time to work, but also important to advocate when they don't.
Thank you for that. I love how you describe what you do, standing in the room and kind of mirroring back what you see. I think like I would find that so comforting. Yeah.
And I've found even I'm normally in hospice, but I also help out in our rural critical access ER. And I found myself in codes where I'm kind of that person, either with the family or walking back and forth to the family, just kind of explaining this is what we're doing. And also asking them, how much do you want to know? Like, I'm happy to be as transparent and honest with you, but people may not want to know that. Also, providing that space, because people sometimes feel guilty asking, well, how much longer is it going to be? Or, whatever.
Yeah, and I hear all of these things as really, as educators, opportunities for us to help the students sort of step into that in different ways and practice that in the classroom. And there's so much in this particular module that you could build off of to do exactly that. So in a safe environment or through simulation. I don't know, Kaylee's here. Kaylee, if you feel like sharing anything from your perspective. Kaylee is from University of Portland. Sorry, I hope I didn't put you on the spot.
Hi, sorry, I actually stepped away for a second. Could you repeat the question?
Oh, just wondering about we're talking about the different ways that in the classroom and also simulation that we can sort of expand on different parts of this module, for example.
Right. Yeah, I know that the students get these modules as assignments as part of the didactic curriculum, and we also have them review as prep for a couple of their simulations. As Andra mentioned earlier, we do have one simulation where the students actually get to complete postmortem care and console a grieving family member, which I think is a really cool way to expand on that particular aspect.
We do want to invite those in the audience, if you have specific questions about things you've been wondering about teaching final hours, or if you have strategies you use that are great, we invite you to share either through the chat or through audio. But also, if there's just a burning question that you've been wondering, we have Luca here as a practice partner expert who might be able to help you think through how might I address something like this with students. So please know that this is also an opportunity for some dialogue.
Yeah. That's what we hope for. While you're thinking, Dan, I wanted to answer your last question that it's one certificate of completion as far as I know, not individual certificates. But maybe I'm incorrect about that.
Well, you get one per module, and we're going to follow up with Relias to see what, Because in the past, you've been able to get a certificate. So Relias has, or the modules just moved platforms as well. So we'll follow up on that. But
Okay.
students will get a completion certificate for each module. And if they have all 6, that they have completed the full curriculum.
I'm gonna drop in the, oh, okay, Maureen. It's part of
Oh,
our new grad critical care program in peds. We offer an option. Oh, trip to the morgue. Oh, that's a good experiential.
mhm.
How's that been going?
It goes well, actually. We make it optional because it's the end of our 3 unfolding simulations, and I think it helps pull everything together. And we offered it to our SPs to come as well, and they really found a lot of meaning into it as well. More about process, but it's a great way to tie that into sort of teaching end of life, the procedural part of it as well for our hospital.
Oh, that's excellent. So SP, everyone I'm gonna guess is standardized patients.
Yes, yeah.
Those that may not be familiar with that. So Lena asked ask a question. Oh, you already answered her about the faculty guides. Okay, great. I am dropping a document that's really long into the, oh, I just dropped it to one person. I'm sorry. Let me do it again. This is we put this together. It's several different position statements that address many of the things that are embedded in this module. Withdrawal, withholding, medically, feeding,
Nutrition,
medically,
hydration.
yes.
Nutrition.
We're getting away from the word artificial. That's where I'm kind of hiccuping. Medically provided nutrition and hastening death. So these are position statements. And you might think about using these in the classroom because they build again on, so here they've completed the ELNEC modules. Now let's look at what our different professional organizations say about this. ANA has a statement on palliative and end of life care. That's the first one in that compendium of different documents. And there's also, I think I want to draw you to page, I want to say it's 16.
We're
but
not seeing it if you're showing it. We're still seeing the slide, just letting you know.
Oh, but okay, so I will do a different screen share, and in the meantime, it's in the chat.
Mhm.
Did you see it in the chat?
Mhm.
Okay, let's see here. No, that's not it. This is it. Here you go. And I better make that bigger. So ethical use of opioids in palliative care. They're all here together, but there's one that, Luca, you want to talk about this while I get to it, what you sent me? This is it. Expected.
Yeah.
Love this.
Yeah, so I actually on Facebook, a friend who was not in the medical field posted this, and I just really loved it. And I actually reached out to the author and asked if it was something we could include in our kind of hospice binder. And she said that that was totally fine. What it talks about is kind of that immediate moment when someone dies. And I think, also thinking back to when I was a student, kind of that fear of, okay, what happens either when someone codes or when someone dies? Like, what do I do? And so this is talking specifically about an expected death, and that an expected death doesn't have to be an emergency. And I really think that helps as the nurse calm yourself that, okay, this is not, I don't need to do anything immediately, but also is wonderful to share with family. And so I'm the nurse in the middle of the night who gets the phone call saying, their loved one passed. And I always try and, say, how can I help you at this point? There's no rush. I can come out if you want. If you don't want to, that's fine. I can call the funeral home, but there's no rush on that. The loved one can stay for 24 hours in the home, and really kind of giving people permission to pause, because there is a lot happening in that moment, even if it's an expected death, even if we knew that it was happening today or, whatever, there's still a lot going on in that moment. And also, death is not, I mean, it's finite, obviously, but there is a little bit of gray area of there's going to be a time when the breathing stops, but there's also going to be a time when cardiac activity stops. And so, in my practice in hospice, where we don't have people hooked up to the monitor, we consider time of death when the breathing stops. But when I'm in the ER sometimes, I'm sitting there and I tell the loved one, they've passed because they stopped breathing. But then everyone on the team is watching the monitor waiting for that cardiac activity to stop, and it takes several minutes. So just kind of that recognition that there is space to be held in that moment, and giving people permission and encouraging them to pause in that moment.
Yeah, one of
And
the
as a
hardest
new
things for us
nurse,
to do is to stop moving, like
Yeah.
we want to move around, our own discomfort around us.
Exactly.
So,
Yep. And as a new nurse, I remember the first time I called, a time of death on a patient. It was an expected one, but I remember going back 2, 3, 4 times because I just didn't really trust myself that there really was no heartbeat or no breathing. And just kind of preparing people for that. It's not as obvious as one may think in the moment when someone dies.
Yeah, thank you for that reminder, and all of us to remember that this happens across many, many settings. So we have just about 8 minutes, and I wonder if we should go, thank you, Luca, for that. I wonder if we should go to talk about the workshop. And would you like me to share the faculty corner?
Yeah.
I think Dan might have also in the chat.
Yeah.
People might already be there.
Yeah. So Andrew's going to take us. So ELNEC Faculty Corner is housed on the AACN website. And as is all of ELNEC, I should say, but we have this faculty corner, and it's a resources to this. But the faculty corner, we are in the process of working with AACN to shuffle some things around. So it might have a different look in just a few weeks, but this is where you can find out more information about the modules themselves, how to access those, the resources we shared today about CARES competency statements, teaching and evaluate. Oh man, she's already been doing it. We just met this morning and it already looks different. Sorry, that was a moment of, wow, so fast.
Yes,
Okay.
right down here.
Yeah, so we have teaching and evaluation resources. So encourage you to check this out. We really want to make this a space where you don't have to reinvent the wheel. But if you have any strategies that you're using, we would welcome you to share those with us. There's a submission button where you can provide us with that. We'd love to be able to share it with other faculty across the country. And this is where we're really excited to announce an upcoming event. This is an inaugural event that will be launching this summer. So July 18th through 19th at the University of Portland, we are hosting a palliative care workshop for faculty. So implementing the essentials domain of palliative care, but we're really focusing on faculty development and leadership. So Andrew, if you'll go to learn more.
Sure, I'll open that up. Yes, and this is largely funded by ELNEC, City of Hope, and University of Portland.
So this is it's a 1.5 day workshop for faculty, and we're really going to dive into this whole realm of palliative care education more, thinking about competency-based education. We will have someone from AACN joining us to open our session to ground us in some of those competency-based principles, but thinking about how does palliative care education, how might that look at your school in didactic settings, in clinical settings, simulation, really just thinking in a broad way. But one of the most exciting things for us, at least, is that we are able to offer this with very little cost. So we are, there's no registration cost for this. That's being funded, like as Andrew mentioned, by our lovely funders. We are providing housing as well for free, provided you're willing to stay in the dorms at University of Portland. So if you wish to have other housing arrangements, that's on you. But we are, again, able to provide housing for this. So basically faculty have to be able to get there. So the travel isn't covered, but we'll provide meals and the lodging and all of that. We are accepting applications now. We're asking for kind of who this is targeting, I should say. It's those full-time faculty, ideally employed 2 years in an institution. But if you haven't been there 2 years, but you're someone who's really gung-ho about wanting to do this work, reach out to us. I mean, that's not a hard and fast requirement. But we do ask that the faculty be primarily teaching in an undergraduate program, because we are, for this inaugural workshop, really going to focus in on that entry level nursing education. So those pre-licensure or the BSN type curricula. So RN to BSN would fall under that as well. We do also have an opportunity with this, if you'll scroll back up just a skosh, to not only submit your application, but also if you wanted to submit an abstract. We know sometimes if you're able to disseminate your work at a conference, your school might provide some funding. So if you are needing a way to get some school funding for your travel, we do have an abstract opportunity. We'll have sort of a poster session that first evening sponsored by the Cambia Health Foundation. So just wanted to call your attention to that, that opportunity is there as well. Those are separate applications, so you don't have to put the abstract in at the same time. We just want to offer that, because I know for me, I don't get funds unless I'm presenting. So we're making that available. But as you can see here, the checklist, we do ask for just some goals. Again, wanting to kind of see where you're at with your palliative care education, why you're interested in this. This mirrors a lot of our other ELNEC curricula that have been, or our other ELNEC workshops that have been grant funded, where we do ask that you set some goals initially, and then we'll follow up with you at 6 and 12 months to see how those are going. And then a letter of support, because we're really wanting faculty to join us who are in a space where they're ready to, again, advance the palliative care education in their program. And so we'd like to see that there's administrative support for those changes as well. Doesn't have to be a very complex letter, but just knowing that there's administrative support.
Let me
yeah.
just add a couple of respond to some
Yeah.
questions. We have 2 minutes. We don't really have exclusionary criteria necessarily, Gina. And if you've attended something in the past, that we're not gathering that information. If you think this would be useful in a way that helps you move integrating palliative care education at your school, then we would love for you to apply. And it's not going to be recorded, I don't think.
It's fully in person.
Yeah, this is all in person, and we're asking for 2 people. If you have another person from your school, great. But to maximize the funds, we're at this point limiting to 2 people from an institution. But if you're just an N of 1, that's great too. And it's going to be great. It's going to be really fun. Portland's really pretty in July.
There's a question, how many people? We have room for 100 faculty. So we'll be accepting 100 faculty to join us. There is a little bit of a first come, first serve, sort of, kind of. We're going to be reviewing applications in waves. So if you want to claim your spot for this, we recommend you submit that application. But there's our contact information's on that site. So if you have any questions or need clarification about any of the application information, or what is this about, or however we can be helpful, we're more than happy to answer those questions for y'all.
For those of you that are in different regions, if you get onto the faculty corner in the last minute, I'd like to draw your attention to the regional support. Some of our regional leaders are on the call here. Susan Meskis is from Alaska, and she's a contact if you happen to be from up there. And Dan is in Hawaii, and he is leading the islands. I think those are the folks that are here from the regional work, but there are other regions. So if you're from different areas, you might want to look in here and see who your more local person contact might be. With that, we better wrap it up, and we were delighted to have you here. Hopefully it was a useful experience for you. Next month, we're going to hop over to the graduate curriculum. So if you teach in the graduate program, you'll find that link here under upcoming events, the end of February. Thanks, everybody.
Thank everyone.